So it's December, and I was sitting there making a list of all of the things that I have to get done before Christmas. Decorating the tree, decorating the house, making Christmas presents, buying Christmas presents, making Christmas cookies. And it occurred to me that it's my turn to make a video. This is a drink I call a Shirley Temple Black because it's not a virgin. It has rosemary in it because I saw something on Facebook that said that you should use smoked rosemary in your drink, your holiday drink. I don't know what the smoking the rosemary is for. So here's my theory. If we get a drink, we set it on fire, and we just smudge 2020 and tell it to bugger off. Let's do that. What does this have to do with making Christmas ornaments? Nothing. I just needed a drink. The Christmas ornaments will come after I roll the logo. Let's go. Welcome back to Building Steam, the channel where we talk about creating, making, cosplay, sewing, foamsmithing, and all kinds of fun stuff like that. My name is Lady Etoile, and welcome to my Christmas studio! So it's December, and that's a time of year that we all put a lot of pressure on ourselves to create the perfect holiday for our friends and family. We want to have the perfect decorations, we want to have beautiful, delicious treats, and the perfect meal, and of course, we want to give good gifts. As a maker, I'm really into giving handcrafted gifts. It's really important to me to kind of give some of myself to my friends and family. However, I'm also one of those people who is just kind of in the moment, and I rarely think ahead to start making gifts in like July. And so I usually start in November, which means that one or two people get beautifully intricate, complicated, handcrafted gifts that I was hoping to make for everybody and that I just ran out of time. I do, however, have a solution for a simple, beautiful, handmade ornament that will have people thinking that you are an expert at needlework. And you only need to learn one stitch. What more could you ask for? Look how pretty that is. So let me show you how to do it. I started by collecting the materials I would need for this project. You can use any kind of fabric for this. You don't need to buy new fabric, any that you have sitting around, or even recycle a piece of clothing. I ended up using the red taffeta that is sitting on top because it showed the stitches most clearly. You will also need rhinestones and rhinestone glue, embroidery floss, embroidery needles, and of course scissors. I also used some trim that I had sitting around left over from another project, and stuffing to fill out the little pillow shape, although there are different ways to finish it, and I did use recycled stuffing from an old pillow. I cut my taffeta into a 5-inch square and marked my center point by drawing lines across at 2.5 inches. I created a template out of pasteboard of a triangle that was 3 inches on all sides, and then I placed it exactly in the center of my 5-inch square. I then traced around it with my fabric marking pens. I would normally use chalk for this because the pens really don't vanish well from the taffeta, but I wanted a nice visible line for you guys to see that wouldn't rub off as I was working. So there you see, I have my cross and my triangle in the center of my shape, and now I'm just about ready to get started with my stitching. The stitch that we're going to use today is actually called the feather stitch. I'm going to take my embroidery floss and I'm going to cut off a piece that is about the length of my forearm, maybe a little bit longer. Embroidery thread comes with 6 strands twined together, and how many strands you use will make the stitches you do thicker or thinner. For this project, I did go with 3 strands. That's kind of standard. You have to be careful when you are unspooling them. You have to sort of gently pull them apart and untwist them, or you're going to end up with a big tangle. I threaded my needle. I'm going to go to the left-hand corner of my triangle and go through from the back of the fabric to the front. I did knot the end of my thread so that it would not pull all the way through. Then I'm going to place my thumb down on the thread, holding it in place, and bring my needle to the right-hand side across from the first stitch that I made. I'm going to bring it through the fabric and up the top again. I make sure that I keep the thread underneath my needle, holding it down as I pull it through and tight. This creates like a little Y shape. Pretty simple. And then I'm going to go ahead and do that again on the right hand side, keeping the thread underneath my needle. I'm going to pull it through. And now, because I want my needles to be on both sides of my branch, I'm going to go back to the left-hand side, go from the left toward the right on a little bit of a downward diagonal, keeping the thread underneath my needle. Push it through. There you have it. So I'm just going to do that all the way along my bottom line of my triangle here. The nice thing about doing this stitch as a branch of a pine tree is that not every single one of your stitches needs to be exactly the same size, because we want to create kind of an organic look. I'm going to go to the center line that I drew earlier when I was going to, marking out the center of my fabric. I will go all the way to there, working from the right-hand side to the left-hand side, the right-hand side to the left-hand side. When I finally reach the center line, I will simply take my thread and place it down through the fabric. Got one more to do. Come on, Sheila, let's go. One more. And I'm going to take my thread down through to the back of the project. And that has finished my first branch. Look at that, like magic. Turn it over, work your thread underneath the stitches on the back of the project. Cut it off. Re-knot the thread, and you will be ready to start your next branch. Now, when you do the next branch, you do not need to place it so that it doesn't touch the other one. Of course, tree branches are going to overlap and touch each other. So I actually place my left-hand stitch in the middle of the Y from my first stitch. And so some of my stitches are going to go over the other ones, and that really is fine. So I go through on the right-hand side and making sure you hold down that thread, go through on the right hand side, bring it across, make your little shape. And when you first start out, of course, you do 2 on the right hand side, and then you will go across and do 1 to the left and take it all the way across to your center line. There, I've got 3. And you can see that they sort of go on top of each other in an organic kind of way. And all I'm going to do is continue to take that all the way up to the top of my triangle. Some of them are going to go more straight across, and some of them will go sort of diagonally across to my straight line. Once you get the hang of doing this stitch, I really think that you will surprise yourself by how quickly it actually moves along. And suddenly, out of nowhere, you've got a tree. I mean, maybe not as quickly as it's showing here because I'm pretty sped up, but it really takes me about 20 minutes, I would say, to fill up the whole tree. Once you get up to the top of the triangle, you're going to be having some branches that are really just one feather stitch, which is going to create that sort of Y shape, and that's totally fine. At that point, I was no longer cutting the thread and restarting each set of stitches. I simply went back and forth. I'm not going to be wasting a lot of thread that way because it's so close. When you get up to the very, very tippy top, you're going to make one of your stitches that goes straight up and down, creating kind of the top of your tree. And I'm going to do a set of feather stitches that run from the top of the tree straight down the center line. What that's going to do is give the idea of a trunk without actually sewing a trunk into it. We definitely don't want to skip this step. It really draws the whole thing together, makes it look more like a tree. So I am just going to start up at the top and do one set of feather stitches all the way down until I get to the bottom of the tree. And again, if I'm overlapping some stitches, that is A-okay. Once I get down to the bottom, I would finish that one off and take my thread to the back of my project, just as I was doing with my branches that went side to side. And I finished one half of the tree, all the way up. Guess what? Now you do the other side in exactly the same way, except that when you do your feather stitch, you would be starting on the right hand side and then going across to the left. So once you go all the way up to the top, then you have a full tree. You could, of course, leave it just like this. This is a beautiful, simple ornament. If you are into a more spare style, I think that's absolutely beautiful. However, I'm a little bit more fabulous than that, and so I feel the need to make things sparkle. I took my Jewel It glue, which is my favorite kind. I really think that it holds really well, and it dries very clear. And I placed it randomly in the tree and put on a bunch of rhinestones so that it was nice and shiny and sparkly. Just like decorating a real tree, there is no wrong way to do this. Maybe you like to have lots and lots of ornaments on your tree. Maybe you just like to have a couple. Really doesn't matter. However the spirit moves you. So here are two finished versions of my tree. And you would want to wipe away your chalk markings. The lines that I made for the heavier one for the video didn't entirely come out, but that's okay. I'm still going to finish it. And there's a couple different ways I thought of to finish it. The first one is, of course, doing it as a sort of a little pillow. When I first made this design, I did it to create a bigger Christmas pillow for my mother-in-law. And so you could certainly do that. You can make the triangle any size that you want it to be. Of course, that just takes longer to sew it that way. So I'm going to put one of these away here, and we're going to take this one. And the first way that I thought of to finish it is to create that pillow shape. I'm going to take another 5-inch piece of taffeta and place it on top of the first one, right sides together. I did leave, in measuring 5 inches, I did leave about 1/2 inch in my mind to do seams all the way around. You could do a bigger seam that would make a smaller ornament. So I'm just going to sew from the top in a square, leaving a little bit of a space around. If I go here, if I start there and I go across and I go around, turning it in my machine, sewing it in a square, I will have a nice space up top, and then I can use that to stuff the pillow. Because I can't help myself and I always have to get fancy, I did use my trim and put it on the sides right at the seam line, so that when I was sewing it, when I turned it to the outside, I would then have just that little bit of trim showing in the seam all the way around, like a super duper fancy pillow. I also included a little loop by sewing that onto the back side piece, which gave me a hanger. I turn it back to the inside. I'm going to trim all of my seams so that they're not bulky. Whenever I'm turning it back, outside, right side out, I want to make sure that I'm being careful with the rhinestones, that I don't pull them off, although you can always glue them back on if they do come off. And from there, I would take my stuffing and fill up my little pillow. And there you have it. I slip stitched the top so that the hole was closed and created this beautiful little ornament. It's actually more sparkly in real life. Another way that you could choose to finish it, if you're just kind of, you're not big with sewing, or you don't like to you don't have a sewing machine and you don't want to hand sew it, is that you could place it on some cardboard and then do a backing piece, folding the ends underneath so that you don't get frayed edges. And you can just hot glue that down. I don't think that makes quite as fancy a piece. You could also maybe put it on a like a little picture frame. You could make a bigger one and do it in a big picture frame. All kinds of possibilities. So I hope you enjoyed my little Christmas tree ornament project. If you decide to use my design to make one for yourself, I would love to see it. Like I said, you can make this triangle as big or as small as you like, so there's lots of different applications for it, and you can make it all different colors as well. So hit me up at www.facebook.com/LadyDeLetoile and show me what you did. I would love to see it. I hope that you have an amazing holiday season no matter what you celebrate. And here's to moving into 2021 a little bit saner, a little bit brighter, with lots of making. It's going to be a good year. Cheers. It's a little less scary with the bells.